Greetings and salutations, test takers. This is the Series 7 Guru coming to you from my off-grid studio, getting our kicks on historic Route 66 with our Tuesday Ask the Series 7 Guru Anything, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Arizona time. You can find us here. Tell us what series exam you're taking and where you're joining us from. We'll take care of some housekeeping, and then we'll answer any questions or attempt to answer any questions. Sometimes when I'm teaching for companies, they'll give the students an evaluation. They get to rate me on a scale of 1 to 10 on my ability and willingness to answer questions. And I always say to those companies, it really should be 2 separate ratings, right? I mean, because sometimes I'm able to answer the question, but not willing. And other times I'm willing, but I'm not able. So they're actually 2 separate things. But I'm able and willing to give it our best attempt in terms of trying to answer any questions you have. If you do have a question for me, once you get done with housekeeping, it's helpful to me if you put what exam you're taking, SIE or S7 with a capital Q, followed by your question. There is a lot of overlap, and sometimes the nature of your question gives away the exam that you're studying for. But, how they test on one particular exam may be different than the other. So it's helpful. It's not necessary. If you are looking for a free supplement to your paid materials, nothing better than my YouTube channel. Everything's free. Well, I had a guy today. It happens every now and again. The guy says, Dean, there's too many commercials every 7 seconds. I go, you're exaggerating. I said, listen, I don't like watching commercials either on YouTube. So I pay $20 a month. I don't have to watch the commercials. So, you said make it stop. That's how you can make it stop. Pay the $20 a month. Let's assume you're going to be with me for 6 months. I come into your life for a reason and a season. The reason is help you matriculate and get your marks past your exams. The season is how long that takes. So let's say it's 6 months, 6 times 20, $120, and you don't have to watch the commercials. And he said, well, I guess I'll just suffer. I said, well, young man, if suffering in your life is that you have to watch commercials on YouTube, you are pretty blessed because there's a lot of suffering in the world, and a lot of people would exchange that suffering with you, right? So it is free. Maybe I'll demonetize the channel and make it all free. But I don't sell channel memberships. That would be the other solution. I don't sell coffee cups. I don't sell T-shirts, all that other kind of stuff, right? If you're looking how to do it, I have over 1,800 videos. There's, thousands of hours of content. I've organized the channel and playlists. So what you do is you find your series exam. SIE, for example, there's 4 playlists. People say, which one I want to start with? I say the one that says playlist 1, start here. That's a podcast overview of the exam, gives you kind of the reconnaissance of the terrain and what that exam looks like, start to finish. I think of it as kind of like the book, cover to cover, if you will. Then there's lectures, and then there's a practice test and practice questions, and then there's a content explication. So that's how you use it if you're trying to, binge. It's a buffet. Take what you like, leave what you don't. Now, if you're looking for a particular topic, use the channel search bar. It's okay. Tonight, people are going to ask me questions that I've asked and answered many times. They exist forever in video format. If they went to the channel search bar and put in accrued interest or parity or whatever it is, half a dozen videos would show up. Magically appear for you, but that's okay. But use that search bar if you're looking for a particular topic. Now, in terms of paid supplements, there's no better paid supplement than a Kaplan Q Bank if you already don't have one. Best in class. It has a performance tracker. Somebody asked me, what does remediation mean? I'll answer that at the end of the evening. If you submit questions early, I take care of that at the end of the session tonight. So somebody asked about suitability standards under FINRA 2111. Somebody asked about remediation. So as I close up shop this evening, I'll answer those questions. Anyways, a 15% discount code at checkout is Guru15. For a Kaplan Q Bank on the 7, for example, that's $55.80, 3,600 questions, simulated exams. I think that's a worthwhile investment. It's not a time to be frugal. If you're doing the SIE, for example, it's about $40, right? So make sure you do that. Now, if you win the drawing that we do at the end of our evening, you do not win an hour of tutoring at a date and time of your choice. What you win is a coaching call, and you would go to deantenneytutoring.setmore.com. You'd go to the coach class tab and you'll find where to register the coaching call. It's not a perpetual offer. I had somebody today contact me, said they won the coaching call like a year ago and they would like to claim the coaching call. I said, well, go to the tab and I'll let you register. But, it's not meant to be something that you can bank for a year. It's kind of like test question, your CE credits for NASA exams, right? The question is 12 hours and you can't bank them, right? So you got to use them or lose them, so to speak. Anyways, that's where you go. They also find most of the stuff on my booking page is paid, but there are a couple free things. Today we did a Q&A jam session. If you're interested in that, you go to the same place, deantenneytutoring.setmore.com. Go to the class tab. You'll find our free weekly Q&A jam session. We also have free office hours for paid students there. So there are a couple free things. I also recommend as a paid supplement, Brian's Test Geek. He's kind enough to give us a 20% discount code on that. You are not alone. You are not alone. We have all kinds of people in a similar situation. We have communities Guru Nation, right? We have a Facebook community. Our Facebook community is called Baby Brokers Doing Hat Tricks. A hat trick is 3 successes in a limited time frame. Baby brokers is a term of endearment in the securities industry. We have 1,400 coming up on 1,500 members there, chats going on for all of the various exams. So if you're a Facebook person, you can find us there. I'm not on Facebook much, so if you're trying to find me, you can find me, here or somewhere else. We also have subreddit communities. We have a subreddit for Series 6, our Series 6. We have a subreddit for Series 7 and SIE, our Series 7. We have a subreddit community for NASA exams, 63, 65, 66. And we have a subreddit for 9s, 10s, and 24s, or 24. So feel free to check us out if you're looking for a tribe. Feel free to join one of ours. Okay, let's see what we got going on. I think that's all the housekeeping. I don't think I missed anything. And let's see what we got going on in comments. Oh, my goodness. Series 7, Cincinnati. All right. Catherine, mortgage coaching. I'm tutoring a professional athlete, Catherine, and he said, could he call me coach? I said, yeah, you can call me coach. You can call me teacher. You can call me instructor. You can call me the Series 7 guru. My haters, I don't know what they call me. Taking the 66 from Vermont. What a beautiful state. Wow, that's a beautiful place. Vermonters. What do we call Vermonters? One of the famous, you probably know this, Zaneta. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Test question. We have exemptions under the SEC Act, the Prospectus Act of 33. And one of those is an intrastate offering, Rule 147. And one of Zaneta, the most important, famous intrastate offerings of securities only sold within the state of Vermont to residents of Vermont was Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Right? They originally raised money by selling securities using the intrastate exemption 147. Or the other test question, if you were fortunate enough to participate in that, you have to hold it 6 months and then you can sell it to a resident of Connecticut. North Carolina, woohoo! I spent a lot of time in North Carolina. You wouldn't think it, but there's a lot of financial institutions in North Carolina. Vanguard's got a big campus there. Certainly Bank of America has a big campus, LPL. So I spent a lot of time in North Carolina. And Charlotte is really close to South Carolina. I didn't realize how close they are, the state border to Charlotte, until I got a ticket. I didn't even know I was in South Carolina. The trooper pulled me over and he said, welcome to South Carolina. I go, oh, who would have thunk it? Brian is busy with his significant other. So I teased him. They're having a romantic getaway. So my wingman is not with me this evening. It's just me. Now, the good news with that, Yasha, is we can stay as long as we want because I don't have a significant other. So I can stay out here as long as I would like. Anyways, 91. Wow. How could that be? How could that be? You are a statistical anomaly. Now, was that your first time through Brian 65 practice 10? You got a 91? I mean, that seems like an awful high score. Usually, and I'm actually not saying this is you, but usually when people get a very high score on a practice test and then they don't make their mark, a lot of times it's because they memorized questions and answers. So, that could be the case there, right? In a month, you'll get sponsorship. You don't need sponsorship for 65. You can take a 65 with or without sponsorship. Same for the SIE. You need sponsorship for a 6 or a 7. Utah. Ooh, I won't do this again, Vanessa. I was in Vegas for and I retired for a long time. And I always said, someday I'm going to make that drive to Salt Lake City instead of flying. Oh my God, what a mistake that was. I mean, all these trucks, traffic, it took me like 9 hours. I could hop the Southwest plane and been there in an hour. So beautiful, another beautiful state though, another beautiful state. When I got there, Vanessa, I was teaching at this campus and I said, hey, where can I get a cup of coffee? And they said, Dean, there are no bad cats on this campus. I said, bad cats? What are bad cats? They said, Dean, bad cats are caffeine, that's the C, alcohol, that's the A, tobacco, that's the T. We don't have any bad cats around here. I said, wow. I said, I'm so not a good prospect. I start the morning with a little caffeine. I end the evening with a little alcohol. I like to smoke a cigar every now and again. So. Retesting SIE Monday. Okay, so be confident, Carlo, in the execution of your study plan. You put in the time and the work from your first attempt. Be confident in yourself. Most importantly, be confident in your answers on Monday. Don't be changing answers. Carlo, good news. The testing gods have been smiling favorably upon us. We have had all kinds of testing victories this last couple of weeks. I'm hoping this third week will happen as well. And Yasha, Sunday, I'm going to not put you in the last week. I'm going to put you in the next week, right? For statistical purposes. Mid-60s, not been as tough. The variance should be in your favor, Carlo. So mid-60s, if I were betting, would say, I think you're going to make your mark. The Darth Brew past the 6. Yay! So we do two things. Ring the bell. And we also toast testing victories. Tonight, a student sent me, I told a question about flying Southwest and how Southwest founder Herb Keller used to drink wild turkey. And so he sent me a bottle of wild turkey. Every time I have wild turkey, and when I was flying Southwest, or I'm having one now, I always toast the memory of Herb Keller as well as you're toasting your testing victory. So cheers, Darth Brew. I know you've been with us for a while. So that's exciting news. We have regulars, and I put Darth Brew in one of our regulars there. Oh, that was bad form. Forgot to. Oh, 101. I mean, it's like 55% alcohol. By the way, that's very gratifying. I'll tell Brian, when I talk to Brian, I'll tell him that you checked in and you got that 6 testing victory. I think when you first joined us, I thought Darth Brew was about beer. And I think Brian, and you confirmed that it was about coffee. I love black. I like strong coffee too. Hey, Rashad, thank you so much for joining us from LinkedIn. We broadcast to LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. YouTube is our preferred platform, but it always warms my heart when I see people joining us from LinkedIn and Facebook. And boy, what a smile. You look spirit-filled. That is a good-looking profile picture there, my friend. I'm a Marine. I don't wear ties anymore, but I always love a gentleman who knows how to make a proper tie knot. So looking good. Tuning in from Jacksonville, Florida. Well, Rashad, I hope I'm not messing that up too bad. Rashad, I told you I'm tutoring a professional athlete, and he played for Florida State, won a national championship, and then he played for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Rashad, I always say if we are honest, ethical professionals, if nothing else, we are helping those people from running into scamsters. And boy, there was a major scamster who took advantage of some of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Fred Tyler, who was a running back, he had an investment advisor named Tank Black, and he lost all his money. And good news, he signed a couple more contracts and was able to replenish his retirement funds. Jacksonville, Raymond James would be my guest, Rashad. Are you Raymond James? I think they're in Jacksonville, or I think it's St. Petersburg. I think the headquarters, home office of Raymond James is down there somewhere. I think we talked about that. Well, it can be the draws, Yasha. That's why I joke about dream draws and face of death draws. It's a joke. The draws are random, but that can happen. Sometimes you can miss your mark, and then you power up on the stuff you were weak on, and then you get another draw, and it's heavy on the different stuff, and you let that stuff lay follow. So whenever you're reattempting, you got to make sure you overlearn everything. You know, because you want to be able to take down any draw. And so that means you don't just want to work on what you were weak in on the first draw or the second. You want to work on it all. You want to get everything above par so that you can take down any draw. So it could be, Yasha. I mean, the draw could be different. I mean, and, you know, people are incredulous, Yasha, when I say, and I say this a lot, I take some heat from it. I think the 65 is the toughest exam. And, you know, people who take 7 are incredulous when I say that. I say, well, the 7 is a lot of stuff, but there's a narrative thread to it. It kind of makes some narrative sense. Whereas the 65 is all over the place. There's not really a through line from the start to the finish of that exam. I think I clipped that and made it like a short, and I was surprised, Yasha. I had like 2,000 views with people who totally agreed. They were probably 65 test takers who were struggling to slay that 65 dragon, right? SIE. Well, Vanessa, same thing on the SIE. I cannot stress this enough. You want to overlearn the SIE. You know, we don't tell you when you passed your score, and I wish we still did, but you want to overlearn that because you want to come out as strong from that SIE. Because if you really put in that time and lay that base for your SIE, it will pay huge dividends on your 6 if that's your next leg of your testing journey, or pay huge dividends if a 7 is the next leg of your testing journey. If you're taking a 6, you can almost pass out of a 6 if you do a good job on the SIE. So make sure you put in that effort, be dedicated, be disciplined, be organized, and come out of that strong. Don't come out of that wobbly. You want to come out of that strong. 7 from Connecticut. All right. Lots of money in Connecticut. Past my Series 7, one of my favorite persons, Gerlinda, or just Gerland. I apologize, I'm messing that up. He said that one of his asset classes in his portfolio is he buys homes in areas that he thinks billionaires might want to live because he thinks that he can then sell them at some point. So, Connecticut, New York, Florida, that kind of thing. Yay, Stephanie, I'm so happy for you. I got your text. I think I responded to it. Kudos, slaying the Series 7 Dragon. Woo! Stephanie, we had a lot of people. I practice the Hippocratic Oath, which is first do no harm. And so I'm a little leery of interacting with people like a day or two before their exam because it could cause people to get wobbly and go backwards. It's certainly not my intent. And, I'll make an exception if I'm working with some people and, I'm worried if they're reaching out like at 8 o'clock the night before, it's not a good sign. But last week we had all kinds of people who were suffering from anxiety and they were getting a little wobbly. And, I think the encouragement, I joke, I'm not the Tony Robbins of, FINRA NASAA exams. I don't do motivation stuff. I, just help you on the content. That's on you. In this case, so I did make some exceptions, and I worked with a lot of people just on that stuff, even though I'm not qualified to do any of that. But I think it pushed them over the top. We drug them across the finish line, which is what it's all about. Acolyte, boy, if anybody deserves that, it's certainly you, my friend. You are one of my favorites. Let's talk about why Acolyte is one of my favorites. When he's been participating in our live streams over these last, 3 or 4 weeks, I could be wrong on that, Acolyte. Anytime you ask Brian and I for, advice, as I said, the advice we give is a buffet. You don't have to follow it. And we don't, if you're a tiger, we're not asking you to change your stripes. But Acolyte was always, I thought, receptive to, accepting the advice. I mean, it's foolish not to, because literally we've, helped tens of thousands of people make their mark, and we have decades of experience. So you've been one of my favorites, Acolyte. Moving on to 7, I think you're going to get that dragon slayed too. Well, be careful. It's different exam, but yeah, there is some overlap. I think there's some things you're going to find even easier. There's not as much analytical method kind of stuff on the 7. Our pleasure, Acolyte. Pass the SIE. Woohoo! That's what it says. I drink. That's what I do. I drink and I know things. Kudos, Terry. Kudos. 6. As I just said, Terry, I love that you got your SIE testing victory. I always say the journey of 3-0 begins with 1-0. And boy, that SIE effort will pay big dividends on your 6. Big dividends. Oh, there you go. Yeah, why not? Yasha, why not? Why not? I would go for it. Right? I mean, you don't get your self-esteem wrapped up in this. I mean, it's a rite of passage. It's a barrier to entry in the securities industry. And if you don't have sponsorship, go ahead, go do it one more time, right? And then when you get sponsorship, then you could go for the 7, and depending on your firm, either 63, 65, or 66. A 66 is a combination. So absolutely, I would go for it. Series 7 question. New to the industry, and by the grace of God, passed the SIE. Woo! Rashad, my dad's name is Dean Tenney Rashad. I was doing a seminar, and one of my clients came in and said, Dean, Google's wrong about you. I said, it is. I said, what's it say? It says you're a missionary. I go, no, the missionary is the other Dean Tenney. That's my father. It was when I'm hanging out, Rashad, with my dad's tribe. I always tell them, Jesus' first miracle was turning the water into wine. That's a pretty good miracle. And my dad's friends will go, no, it's non-alcoholic wine. I go, really? I don't remember reading that part. 920. I almost, Rashad, I don't know what other commitments you have going on in your life. I almost think that's too long. I mean, the problem with 920 is by the time you get to 920, you might forget like unit 1. So you might want to consider moving that date up a little bit. That's just my personal opinion. Using Achievable, what my best recommendations for this 6-week, roughly 2-3 hours a day. So my recommendation would be first to lay base. And I would break, let's say you're going to do 3 hours. I think 2 hours is pushing it. Let's call it 3. And I would do 2 90-minute study blocks a day. So that means, you're going to be doing the 3 hours you just told me you're committed to. And then what I would want to know is, what are you going to be doing in the study blocks? What I would want you to do is do reading in one study block, do practice questions in another study block, watch a video in another study block. I'd like you to rotate your study activity. That'll keep you fresher longer. Now, as you start transitioning through the units, let's say it's unit 1. You get done with reading unit 1, watch a video on unit 1. You can watch the video to consolidate the reading or watch the video to put a dent in the reading, whatever you want to do with the video, right? And then do 25, 30 practice questions. When you get a 75%, move on to unit 2. Pay attention. Unit 2, we do the practice quiz, but we don't move on. Now we do a custom quiz from unit 1 and unit 2. You want to keep bringing up that caboose as you kind of matriculate through those units, right? So that would be my recommendation. I like that you're taking a day off. I can't stress it enough. I always tell people, to take a day off, because your brain needs to refresh and reset. And you can't be doing this like 10 hours a day. So I'm glad you're taking a day off. I usually suggest a Saturday or Sunday just to let your brain lay fallow and then go back to it on a Monday. Patrick, woohoo! Woo! Yeah, you're not alone, Andrew. That's why we do this Tuesdays. We have a tribe, a Guru Nation. We're here every Tuesday. Sometimes, one of the reasons I started the channel is during COVID. I thought, man, am I ever going to teach a live class again? Maybe not. And the other problem was everybody was doing this on their own. In the old days, you'd have a cohort of 20 people, 30 people, all doing the similar situation, doing their tests. And if somebody had a bad day, we could take them to lunch or take them for pizza. We could buck them up a little bit. And that's harder to do when you're out there on your own. So one thing I highly recommend is get plugged in somewhere, whether it's Reddit, whether it's Facebook, whether it's here on Tuesdays, where it's my weekly jam session that we do on from my booking page that we did today. Try and get plugged in so that you're not, you don't have that feeling of being alone. Now be careful. If you end up in a community where there are energy vampires around, well, then stay away. Right? So, all right, love it. Well, options, the 3 big areas, Acolyte, are options, munis, and mutual funds. So yes, I think you should focus a lot on options. If you can get really good at options, munis, and mutual funds, you can get awful spastic and still pass the 7. If you're weak in one of those areas, it's going to be hard because there's not enough performance opportunities elsewhere to make that up, right? So about 20 plus or minus on mutual funds, 20 plus or minus on munis, 20 plus or minus on options, right? So I think you should focus on that would be my recommendation. That's in the unit 3 of your series 7, which is called providing basic product information. That's 91 of 125 questions. So that's where the vast majority of those questions are. Yeah, that hurts for sure. I will put my video. I have a video podcast, and it has 5 recommendations about how to respond to that misfortune. And I will put that in the video description for you. The first suggestion is, while the hurt is still fresh, I'd like you to do an intellectual debrief with yourself. And what I mean by that is get the 7 content outline, and it matches up perfectly with your printout. Function 1, function 2, function 3, function 4. And I want you to go through it and put a plus next to things you thought, well, I knew that didn't do me in. 0, I was adequate, counterintuitive, minus meaning things you were not prepared for. And then put it away, refresh, reset for 3 or 4 days, and then move on to recommendation, my second recommendation. So I'll link that for you. First thing I recommend, while the hurt is fresh, remember what the dragon looks like. Go do that intellectual debrief. By the way, while you're doing that, on that content outline might spring to your mind things or particular questions. Make a note of those, right? And put it away so that when you come back to you or reignite your study plan for this next attempt, you pull that out, and that's how you want to do. The title of that podcast episode is You Failed. Is it over? Spoiler alert. The answer is no, right? There are all kinds of very successful men and women in our business who have had the misfortune of have to go more than once to get over this hurdle, right? Thank you for joining us on LinkedIn. I love it. Minnesota. I used to go teach in Minnesota a lot. Oh, my Minnesota friends, they're so hospitable, such nice people. And boy, can they deal with the cold. I cannot deal with that cold. Man, when Amy Klobuchar was announcing her presidential run, she did it like at -30 weather. They all had their parkas on. I'm like, every once in a while, I would get on a plane and from Vegas and forget I'm going to Minnesota. And I wasn't properly attired. And I got to tell you, man, in the winter in Minnesota, having snow boots and a parka and a beanie, all that stuff makes a huge difference. You're mixing up monetarist and Keynesian. So let's talk about Lord John Maynard Keynes first. Theory is not truth. Theory is a way of explaining things. And so Lord John Maynard Keynes said that when the business cycle is in a trough, when the economy is weak, the reason it's weak is because there's no demand. People who have the resources hoard them, won't spend them, and then other folks don't have any resources. And so what Mr. Keynes said, and his was the antithesis of classical economic theory, which was said, in the long run, it will fix itself. And Mr. Keynes said, well, in the long run, we're all dead. So Mr. Keynes said that what the government should do is use fiscal policy. There's the distinction. Fiscal policy, test question, is government spending and taxation. Now, I think you're going to see more of this LinkedIn user on SIE and 65 than you are in 7. So this might be more of a test prep vendor issue than a Series 7 issue because they bifurcated the Series 7. The Series 7 used to be 2 3-hour, 125 questions, 250, and that's where this used to show up. And then when they split it off, it's there. So anyways, that's called demand side economics, Mr. Keynes. So the government should step on the accelerator called government spending to stimulate demand. Lord John Maynard Keynes would have been happy with Congress and the president, both Trump and Biden, in responding to the COVID situation by sending people checks, right? I said, well, I don't really need a check, but thank you so much, right? So that's Mr. Keynes. Demand side economics sees government spending and taxation as a positive influence in the business cycle. That's the demand side. Supply side says that, the government should make an environment where the capital will be allocated from the private sector more than from the government sector, lower taxes, that kind of thing. Now, monetarist means monetary policy, test question. Monetary policy is controlled by the Federal Reserve Board, our central bank, and that's about the money supply. And one of our favorite famous dead economists is Milton Friedman. And he said inflation everywhere is always a monetary issue. And so monetary policy, the Fed, through using interest rates, if they want to dent demand, is going to raise interest rate using monetary policy. If they want to ignite the animal spirits, as Mr. Keynes says, they would lower interest rates. Right now, people are on the Fed to lower interest rates. That's called monetary policy. The Fed is controlled by controls interest rates, and their mandate, their mission of monetary policy is price equilibrium, price stability, and full employment. So I think I didn't answer your question in this regard. Is there a simplified way to remember the main points? I don't think so. I do have a lecture on economics. I have two of them. And the lecture is called, you can find it in the search bar, it's called Money is a Giant Floating Crap Game. That's my economics lecture. It's all about money going from one place to another. And again, that's a famous quote from Lord John Maynard Keynes. He said, money is like a giant floating crap game. It's always going from one place to another. And what we're trying to do as investors is get to where it's going first, get to the party early, and then leave the party early. So I hope that was helpful. I would tell you on the 7, the test question is going to be, if my client is worried about inflation, purchasing power risk, I have 2 arrows in my quiver. I had some English second language be like, what's that mean? I said, well, an arrow, your quiver is where you hold your arrows, and 2 ways we can respond to a customer who's worrying about purchasing power risk, very testable, is common stocks and TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. I think that would be more likely the test question than, the business cycle on a 7. By the way, one more point. If you're taking a SIE or 65, you should definitely know the definition of a recession is 2 calendar quarters of declining GDP, right? Our German friends, here you go, LinkedIn user. Our German friends had 2 calendar quarters of declining GDP. They are definitely in a recession. That's a test question. And they took a page from Mr. Keynes. They said they're going to spend $1 trillion. Wow, the government of Germany, $1 trillion, $500 billion on defense, and $500 billion on infrastructure. And what they're doing, again, is using Mr. Keynes' theory, demand side, to say, okay, if we don't have enough demand, the German government will create that demand by spending all that money, right? Using fiscal policy. Fiscal policy. Taking the 66 on Friday, scored 78 today on Kaplan. Still struggling with analytical. So I have a video, Noah, analytical methods. I got 3 or 4 of them. I got one with a tutoring replay. Noah, I just put that up, a video today where last Tuesday, somebody asked me about analytical methods, net present value and discounted cash flow. And we had a 7-minute answer to that. And I clipped it. I made it short. It's already got like 300 views. So obviously people like are interested in such things. If you're using Kaplan, Noah, then you're going to look at unit 20 is analytical methods. That's, present value, future value, discounted cash flow, balance sheets, and unit 22 on Kaplan, which is performance measures, right? So performance measures, you should definitely be able to do total return. You should definitely be able to do current yield. You should definitely be able to do after-tax return. You won't get all these, but we don't know which ones you're going to get. You should be able to do, a real rate of return. That means inflation. You take inflation out. So, past the SIE. Woo! Been trying to find sponsor for Series 7. Been unsuccessful. Wow. Man, what should you do? I don't know if the MQP, Nickett, check if the MQP is available for the SIE. I don't think it is. So, but it might be. MQB allows you to keep your registrations current, but I don't know I think you have to be sponsored to even use that. I don't have any, what should you do? Except, unfortunately, you're going to have to retest if that doesn't work. So, when's it's find sponsor, give us a bit down, I'm successful, and now I run the rest. Yeah, it's, I don't know what to tell you on that. Maybe just try and find a job and not worried so much about the pay, just about getting your 7 and activating that, because if you can get the 7, then you can, you qualify for MQP, and then you can keep their registrations current by doing CE. 66 second, starting with Federal X. Okay, well, here we go, Victor. I just did a tutoring session today, and I said to him, I'm going to say to you, Victor, would Dean like you to know everything? The answer is yes. But given that you only have so much brain space, please keep in mind, Victor, it's not the SEC that's making you take the damn test. It's the state administrator. So I think it's more important that you're, the Uniform Securities Act template. Way more questions on the Uniform Securities Act than the federal acts, right? So if you tell me you missed your exam because you weren't as familiar with 33 and 34 in the Investment Advisor Act of 1940 as you were with the Uniform Securities Act, I'd say, I think you had other problems. So I guess I'm saying it's better you're struggling with the federal acts and not the state stuff, because there's a lot more state stuff. There's only really 3 federal acts to be concerned with in a big way on year 66. 33, the Prospectus Act. 33 says if you're going to sell brand new securities to the public, you need to make a registration statement. You need to give people a prospectus, hence the term registered securities. That's 33. Sometimes you get questions right covering up the screen. Are they asking me about, paper prospectuses? 33. Are they asking about people and places? People and places. You cover up your answer key. That's 34. That was part of the New Deal from President Roosevelt, right? President Roosevelt said, you guys are going to thank me later, but nobody has confidence in the securities industry. So in the securities industry, we're going to change it. And 33 and 34 says you, the seller of the security, need to beware. And then 40, the Investment Advisor Act of 1940 stipulates what is an investment advisor. Right now, there's other ones like the Insider Trading Act of 88, perhaps, but those are the big ones. I'm not worried about you, Victor, on that. I'm not worried about that. I'm not saying don't fix it. I'm just saying I'm not worried about it. Wow. Yeah. Ornila. I love that. Yeah, I'm with you because this isn't in English to begin with, particularly the NASA exams. Right. I mean, I don't know how this happened in my life, and I'm all about it because it's, they're some of my favorite people. But I got a handful full of Brazilian test takers right now in the world. And I'm laughing because I understand. I'm not laughing at them. I'm laughing with them because, it's not in English to begin with, so they're translating from, Portuguese to English and then the NASA and then back. And that's just really difficult. Now, you can petition and get extra time of English as a second language. But boy, I tell you, it is a real challenge. I'll tell you what, if I could teach this stuff in Espanol or Portuguese or Mandarin, my goodness, oh man, if I could put on my booking page, you want me to tutor you in some foreign language and I could do it, I'd charge like double the price. Right? So, as I said, the thing is not to get too much of your self-esteem wrapped up in that. I mean, all the people that I work with where English is a second language, it's not a brain power problem. I just went over an exam with a guy today whose English is a second language. And almost always, 50-50, he was missing it because of the language, not because he didn't understand the content. He just didn't understand, what it meant in the translation from English, in his case, to Yiddish. So I was teasing him. I love Yiddish. I mean, man, I'd love to be able to teach in Yiddish. Difficulty with the gain at expiration, well, it's pretty simple. So, Vanessa, there's only 2 spreads. They're debit spreads that you pay for. And if at expiration, the contracts have no intrinsic value, you lose the debit. Period, full stop. It's pretty simple. If it's a credit spread at expiration and there's no intrinsic value, then you get to keep the money, neener, right? So gain at expiration with spreads. So that's if it's outside the range, right? So if we do like a 40 call and a 50 call, all the action takes place between the strikes. And so, maybe it's 4 points is the debit or credit. Let's say 4. My break even is 44. And then if I'm, bearish, it's a credit call spread. I want it below that. If it's a debit call spread, I want it above that. But that's the range. Now, sometimes, Vanessa, when people say they struggle with this idea of debit exercise widen or credit expire narrow, it's because it's like a football game, right? The spread means difference, the difference in the premiums. So sometimes I'm watching a game with my friends, they get all excited. I go, what are you excited about? I mean, it's the second quarter. And they bet on the spread, the difference in the scores. And the scores may be, widening. The difference in the score may be narrowing. So, for example, if in my example, let's say we sold the 40 calls for 6. Now, that would be stupid to just sell 40 calls for 6 naked because you'd have unlimited risk. So I say, Vanessa, let's take part of your money and buy the 50 calls for 2. That's a spread. So does same option, call, different action, buy, sell. So when we initiated the spread was 4, the difference between 6 and 2. So you call me, you say, Dean, what is the difference today? What is the spread today? I say, today, Vanessa, the difference between the premiums on the 40 calls and the 50 is 2. Do you want me to close it out for a 2-point profit? Because you sold it for 4. That was the spread when you did it. Now the spread's 2. You say, no, let it ride. You call me, what's the spread today? I say, it's 1. You want me to close it out for a gain of 3? That's what we mean. That's the hardest part to get, but you don't need to get it. Credit has 6 letters. Expire has 6 letters. Narrows has 6 letters. You call me, you say, what's the spread today? I go, it's 6. Uh-oh, not bueno. The spread, you initiated at 4, now it's 6, and it's widened. The difference has got larger, not bueno. So maybe that's what you're struggling with, is this idea of it moving and then closing it out at intrinsic value. But there's 8 test questions about a spread. The references, the memory aids you gave me, you don't need to understand that, because those are just memory aid devices. If it's a debit spread, you tell me exercise widen, you'll be right every time. There is no scenario in which you tell me it's a debit spread and you tell me that exercise and widen are profitable, which you're going to be wrong. And credit, expire, narrow go together, right? It's like Mountain Dew, do the do, or Nike, just do it. Or like when you're Dean and you're wide, you need to exercise. Now, I joke, Vanessa, in some cultures, this is a sign of wealth and prosperity. So I will link, Vanessa, I have a video called Don't Hate the 8. I've got hundreds of videos on spreads. So you can put that in there and it'll go over. You can join us for the jam session. Plenty of resources. But the biggest thing is, after you are menu driven about a spread, then you think about it. Debit, exercise, widen always goes together. And then see, credit, expire, narrow. The trade price is when you close it out. So like I say, we did our 40 call or 50 call for 4. And now I say we close it out at intrinsic value. We close out at intrinsic value. The stock is 46. We're a loser, by the way. You don't have to buy into that phraseology, Vanessa. The break-in is 44 and 46 is 2 points in the wrong direction. This was a credit call spread and it's bearish. But the 40 call is now worth 6 and the 50 call has no intrinsic value. So that means we closed it out for 6. It widened from 4 to 6. So some people do struggle with this idea of closing it out at intrinsic value. I'm so mad with myself because I feel like I know the material really well. In such a way, sometimes I don't understand what it's asking. Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's a real challenge. It is a real challenge. I agree. Either way I say this, Ornella, is RTFQ, RTFA. Make sure you're reading the full question. Get comfortable with the question before you answer and read the full answer. Know what answers are being offered to you. I told you I've been working with a lot of people with English as their second language. And one thing I was sharing with the guy, he had a huge paragraph. I said, well, listen, as a test taker, before I even jump in, I'm going to read the last sentence first, just to see where this thing ends, right? Before I even attempt to read the paragraph. And I said, then the other thing I'm going to do is read the answer set to see what answers are available to me. And then I was telling him, I said, okay, now as a test taker, without even having read this question, I'm going to toss out B and D because they just don't make sense on any level. I mean, I don't care what the paragraph says. These are just, can't be. So now I have a 50-50 before I even read the question. I now go through and I read the question. I'm looking for those pivot words, Taking the SIE using Kaplan, haven't scored under 80. You're great. Well, that's okay. Anytime Brett, if you would have gone from SEC to Kaplan, it would be the same thing. Whenever you change vendors, your scores are going to drop. Well, you got to be careful with social media. Brett, there's a lot of bullshit on social media. So, Dean likes Kaplan, so I think Kaplan's the best. And Ken Finnan likes STC, so he thinks it's closer. You shouldn't be doing practice questions based on how close to the test they are. That's a losing strategy. Brett, what you want to know is understand the concepts so that any question you get. Now, to answer your point, the closest to the actual test is the exam I wrote. No, I'm joking. Not really, but let me tell you. You can watch me, Brett, go do the FINRA practice test. That is the one I think is most appropriate. So your last intellectual mark inventory should be doing the SIE practice test on the FINRA website. That comes closest to it, right? And if you get a good score on that, I think you will. I don't see any reason to be worried about you because this drop could be just the nature of changing test prep vendors and phraseology. The guy at STC is a guy named Todd. The guy at Kaplan is a guy named Chuck. And you could just be adjusting to Chuck and Todd in terms of the way they say things. What you're looking for, I don't believe in being monogamous about your test prep vendor. I think you should use any resources that are available to you. And so what I do like about having multiple vendors is what you're looking for, Brett, is confirmation, not so much your scores. Is that, Kaplan has a question, STC has a question. For example, Brett, I just put on the channel a question that shows up on every 65, 66 exam about a sofa. And is a sofa a tangible asset? And I called the video, Brett, stupid but testable. And then I say in that whether whoever test prep vendor you get has that question. So I'm hoping that when you go to take the actual test, I don't know about you, when I take a test, I like to get to the first question I know the right answer to. Hopefully I'm not 30 deep. So I have no worries for you. Like I say, if you had started with STC and switched to Kaplan, it would be the same. It would be the same banner basically you put in here. So no worries. And again, you shouldn't count on any test prep vendor providing you questions that look like the actual exam, because that also could get that test prep vendor in with copyright infringement on the actual exam, right? So make sure you're learning the concepts. Don't be buying Q banks or things because somebody tells you they're close to the actual exam. If you spend enough time on Reddit or Facebook, you could find people who think training consultants, Notman, Past Perfect, STC. Usually the battle of that is between Kaplan and STC. What should you do? Well, I think I just answered that question. What you should do. Now, you didn't tell me when your test date is. So, Brett, the other thing I would tell you is that don't get so many voices in your head that, you're struggling a little bit, right? So, I mean, if you're finding that STC is so dramatically different from the way Kaplan lays out things, well, then stop. But, what should you do? I think you should continue on with what you're doing. There's nothing in either of these posts that make me think you're at risk. And then I told you go take the FINRA one about 2 days out. Now, I told you the one that I wrote, what I did, Brad, you might want to check this out. I have all kinds of practice exams on the SIE in my practice tape playlist. I got STC. I don't have STC. I think I have, maybe I do. But I know I have Notman, I have TestGeek, I have Kaplan. So I have lots of practice tests on the SIE there. But I have one I wrote. And the one I wrote, what I did, Brett, was take I call it the doppelganger. I took the FINRA practice test. I kept their answer sets. And then I wrote different questions because that's the challenge too, all of the wrong answers on that could have been right answers to different questions. And so then I just wrote different questions, right? Someday, Brett, I'm going to write a whole exam with just answer sets with no questions. And then we'll play like Jeopardy. What's the question, right? What's the question? Waiting for my 66 window, but probably undertaking about 3 weeks. Currently doing unit quizzes every day and full practice tests every few. I love that. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. So, maybe your firm will let you speed that up. I don't like your 3 weeks out because I don't want you stick LP 640. I don't want you to run out of fuel before you stick the landing. So that indicates that you're going to do pretty good. So, if you can get a quicker test date, I would recommend that. Marcel, woo! Always tell mom. Always tell mom. Yeah, Marcel's joking. For those of you who are not regulars, I can't wait till Marcel comes to Vegas because he's a guy I want to stand next to. That guy is one lucky guy. I think he's won our drawing. I don't know, Marcel, 5, 6 times. So Marcel, we almost we're talking about a rule that you can't win more than once in a 4-week period or something because Marcel's always winning our drawing. But hey, you know what I like though, Marcel, is when you do win, I say, hey, okay, cool. That's somebody I want to spend some time with. All right, Alfredo. Woo! Oh my goodness, the hat trick. Right? That's the hat trick. 3 victories in a limited time frame. Woohoo! Woohoo! All right, Alfredo. I'd be interested in the chat if you want to participate and listen to the poll. I told you I don't sell things on my YouTube channel. But Alfredo, what I have been thinking about selling on the YouTube channel is a tombstone for people like yourself that accomplish the hat trick. Where, I'd have a nice little tombstone from the guruexamprep.com. And Alfredo, what it would have is like you would tell me your dates and your testing victories. And then, we'd send that out to you. So, because I think it's sad that you get the victories and then they don't give you anything. I mean, FINRA could make a fortune, I think, Alfredo, when you pass, they say, and would you like a plaque for $20? Oh my God, send me something. Now, I'm sure they probably don't do it because they wouldn't want you to put a plaque on your wall insinuating that somehow means you're approved by the regulators. But, Alfredo, I wish I had more for you than a bell and a toast. You deserve more. Well, I guess I would say, Alfredo, but now you get to leave the testing fantasy land. You get to re-enter the real world. Alfredo, I'm stuck forever in the testing fantasy land. I never get to leave. Now you get to leave and you get to go make some money. Help your, what warms my heart. It's always very gratifying. Alfredo, I don't know what background you come from, but, I always joke, if you're poor and you deserve to be rich, the securities industry is for you. Because, if you can get past these exams and get the learning curve, you're going to do well. Anybody who's been in our business for any lengthy period of time is going to do well financially. But Alfredo, I've had this happen more than once, where I get the Zoom link for the tutoring and the guy doesn't want tutoring. He's passed his exams and he doesn't know how to just super chat. Just want to say thank you very much. I had a guy yesterday. He's been at it 18 months. He popped into the channel just to say, Dean, I'm just so excited. I'm being able to take care of my clients, take care of my family. What a wonderful, situation. So trust me, if you're in one of those areas right now where you're having motivational difficulty, I assure you that at some point you will walk through and out of the valley of the shadow of death, right? The key to this is to keep walking, keep moving. Well, worst score 81, 82. Listen, people in the chat are saying, really, come on. And you're worried about that, your worst score, you have no problem. Well, Brett, I told you I wouldn't worry about it. I don't lie. If I thought you were at risk, I'd tell you. I don't know when you want me to tell you that, oh my God, watch out, Brett. You need to move your test date. No, don't get wobbly, man. Don't get wobbly. Stay the course. You have no reason not to be confident. Well, you're welcome to send them to me, dean@guruexamprep.com. I'm more than happy to tell you whether it's something you should know or not. Kaplan is sufficient as a standalone prep vendor. So is STC. You don't need to have more than one. Maybe that's what some firms don't want you to have more than one because of this scenario where Brett's coming into me as a corporate trainer. And as a corporate trainer, I said, Brett, why are you messing with STC? We told you we want you to use Kaplan and Kaplan only. Or Brett, why are you using Kaplan? We told you to use STC and STC only. Or Brett, why are you coming in with STC and Kaplan? We told you to use Past Perfect and Past Perfect only, right? So it's not an advantage of multiple vendors if it's going to cloud your mind, right? So you should have no reason to be concerned. I told you everybody who switches test prep vendors, the scores are going to drop. They'll come back up. All right. Woo! Well, you got one more. You're 2-0. One more for the trifecta for the hat trick. You got it. You got it. I passed the 7 10 days ago. Oh my God. You got so many testing victories. Woohoo. I do. 63 does not require a lot of time. It's the only exam where I say you should just do practice test after practice test after practice test. That's the way to get the 63 done. The other thing I would tell you is be careful. The 63 is an exam where people can have a time constraint. You don't have as much time there. So make sure you do all those practice tests. That's only for 63. So, you just heard me telling me you shouldn't learn questions and answers. You should learn the content. The exception is 63. R2 clips. Oh, man, that makes me think of R2D2. But I guess you're R2R2. That's kind of confusing. Thank you for all you do. You're welcome. Oh, my goodness. Look at all those testing victories. Woo-hoo! I feel like starting every 6 class by saying, why don't you get a Series 7? Because you're going to need one eventually. Ugh. I have so many friends, American Funds. Great company, great people. And so many of them have 6s and 26s. 26 is supervising 6s. I can't tell you how many this is happening at T. Rowe Price, Vanguard, Franklin Templeton. where they're rolling out products that require a 7. And so now all those 6s have to go get a 7, and all those 26s got to go also get a 24. So, woo. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I like helping people, and, tutoring is something that speaks to me. And, I do it because I love it. I never thought I knew I had haters until I was on social media. I'm sure they existed. They weren't in my face. And, I'm a little unique in that I am a retired stockbroker. So, this person was giving me a hard time. I said, listen, the securities industry has been good to me. And I know you're a little dim-witted, so I'll just tell you what that means. It means I'm rich and I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. So if I didn't want to tutor and I didn't want to do a live stream, I wouldn't be doing it. So it warms my heart when we're able to help people get in this. And I've had people literally, I was helping a guy with a 24, and, if he doesn't get this done, his world just changes in a really bad way. And I got a guy right now I'm working with that's like that. And so if I can get you dragged across that finish line, it makes me feel good. Business development corporate companies, put that in the channel search bar and it will come back. But a business development company is kind of like a closed-end fund where they invest in privately held businesses, and they only offer you the opportunity to get out, at intervals where they do a mark and say, would you like to cash out? It is testable, and it's a recognition question. So put that in my channel search bar, and you can magically get a short that will come up and tell you exactly what that is and what the test question is. The test question is the type of investments they're making. It's kind of like venture capital for retail investors, so to speak, and then the lack of liquidity. Oh, Woodford, man, good choice, my friend. Woodford Reserve. I have some of that as well. There you go. It's a good one. I have Woodford. I've got some Knob Creek. My bourbon of daily bourbon would be Makers. And I told you tonight I'm doing Wild Turkey. Maybe I should open up some Pappy. Woohoo! What's the best study method? Well, that's a pretty, broad question, Herbert. Brian and I both offer you study plans, right? So if you send Brian an email, he will send you a PDF about what he thinks is involved in creating a study plan. I'll give you a brief overview, but you can also put in the channel search bar. You can put study plan. I have a video podcast episode on creating a study plan. But again, it's a buffet. Take what you like, leave what you don't. And what I would like you to do is read the book cover to cover and as close to one setting as possible, just to see what the lay of the land looks like. Now, people sometimes are incredulous. Well, how long is that going to take? I say, well, Herbert, read for an hour, see how many pages you read, to establish your read rate, see how many pages are in your book, divide, and that'll tell you how many hours that's going to take. I wouldn't highlight. I wouldn't take notes. You're just trying to see what it looks like. Then I would start doing the units. Sequentially, I'd start on unit 1. I'd do the reading and watch a video. I would do the video either before the reading, your choice. I'd watch a video to put a dent in the reading, or I would do the video to consolidate the reading. Then I would do a practice quiz on that unit. I do 25, 30 questions. I get a 75%. I move on to unit 2. I do the reading. I watch a video, do the reading, 25, 30 questions, 75%. I do not move on. I do a custom quiz of unit 1 and unit 2. I want to keep bringing up that caboose. Unit 3, practice quiz, custom quiz, 1, 2, 3. Unit 4, you get the idea. Rinse and repeat. By the time you get through, matriculate through the units, you'll be close to be doing a practice test, already. 7 to 10 days out now is when you want to start doing intellectual inventories by doing practice tests. We want to find out where you're at, right? And then you want to get some scores. So about 7, 10 days out, we no more than 1 practice test a day. You should be doing, spending as much time as remediation as doing the exam itself. And I just would like you to commit. I'd say, okay, how many exams are we going to get done? I had a guy did testing Thursday. He told me he's going to do 3. I said, how the heck are you going to do that? You can't do that. That's impossible, right? Because you got to remediate and you're going to wear yourself out. So don't let the timeline collapse on you. So make sure you're reverse engineering that 7 to 10 days where you're going to be finding out what you don't know. In fact, maybe it's time to talk about this. You don't need to remediate because you are, just starting it. But I did have somebody ask me, well, what do you mean, Dean, remediation? And I said, what I mean about remediation is you don't get a 75% on the quizzes I just told you. That means you don't move on. You got to remediate. You're not getting mid 70s on your practice test. You need to remediate. And so this person said, well, Dean, what is remediation? I said, remediation is the process of remedying or correcting something that's bad or defective. And the first thing to remediation is you have to identify the gaps or issues you have in the content, right? So after you matriculate through there and you do those practice tests, we're not mindlessly doing practice tests to, try and learn. I mean, there's some people out there, like there's some OGs in our business who tell me, you just got to do a bunch of practice tests. That's ridiculous. No, we're doing practice tests, counterintuitive, to find out what we don't know and identify areas of remediation. A tutoring session today, I said, I feel really good as your tutor. And he said, why? I missed these things. I said, you were consistent on what you missed. You weren't all over the place. It was this one thing that you're challenged on. Like, I forget who it was earlier today said they're struggling with closing out spreads, when they're trade to spread, right? Closing that out. I'm not worried about that because that person at least is able to articulate what they're struggling with. The danger is when they can't identify what they're struggling with, because then we can't fix it. I say, I'm confused. I say, well, what are you confused about? You go, options. I go, well, geez, I'd like to be helpful on that, but what the heck does that mean? I said, what are you confused about? I'm confused about closing out spreads when trading a spread. I go, oh, okay, that we can work on that. So the second part of remediation is to choose an appropriate method for the remediation. And what I mean is, if you did something that didn't work, like maybe you don't like videos. Well, maybe this time you say, okay, I'll give a video a chance. Or maybe I didn't do the reading. There's people who don't read. I don't know. So maybe you say, okay, well, I guess I'll suck it up and I'll do the reading, right? So change whatever process it is. The third step to remediation is to build on the previous learning. So again, I'll choose the person earlier in our chat about the spreads, right? I feel pretty good because she knows enough about spreads to articulate, what she's confused about, or he or she, and that's got to be based on previous learning. I mean, he or she wouldn't have been able to put credit, expiring arrow, or debit exercise widen into the chat if they hadn't at least looked at that, been working on it. And so she's identified, he or she, where improvement is needed. And then the last step of remediation is change your complete strategy, whatever it's doing. This might be, now our friend who bought STC, this would be an example of this. He bought it before he's even tested. But sometimes when people have done STC and failed, or Kaplan, they have a test prep vendor. I say, okay, what's your QBank usage rate? And I had a guy, as much as I love Kaplan, I said, listen, it's kind of like Tibbs when he loses the locker room of the Knicks. We got to get a new coach. I said, so, as much as I love Kaplan, it's time to fire Kaplan and go get STC so you can have a different voice, different coach. So that's what remediation is all about. I hope you found that helpful. And that was a question that somebody had sent me. Now let's see if I can find out where I left off with you guys. What's the best day? There we go. So I hope that was helpful, Rick. Wow. Well, thank you so much. Super chat, $20. Woohoo. I gotta fix this thing because there's a thing where I can make people with super chats go to the top and they get their questions answered immediately. You're done. Well, there you go. Right. I've been very fortunate, and I think that I don't know. I guess I wouldn't go so strong as saying you have an obligation to be well informed. But, I think clients do expect, and I've, had some serious people I've done business with, and I think they think with, partly they do business with me because they know I'm kind of informed about things. I read The Economist religiously every week. It comes out on Friday. I'm, a religious reader of the Wall Street Journal each morning. I read the New York Times. I'm not a TV guy. And so, I find the TV to be derivative of the newspapers. So my brother all the time, did you see this on the TV? I go, no, Chris, but I kind of know what you're talking about because, I'm reading the paper. So those are my go-to. I like Scott Galloway, I think has a great podcast. There's some great business podcasts now. Acquired is a great podcast. So there's some great podcasts out there as well. Just check it out. Check it out. Yeah, congratulations. Acolyte is one of my favorites. Weird question. I had an interview with JP Morgan. So, man, you got to interview with Jamie Dimon today? Wow. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. They mentioned they want me to take a Series 6, even though I have a 7. Well, it might be, cats, because maybe they have somebody who's supervising you who doesn't have a 24, maybe. Yeah, I've seen all kinds of situations where they want somebody to have a limited registration. Usually it's supervision, or they don't want you to jump this and go somewhere else. Right? I'm not sure though. So it is what it is. I think JP Morgan's a fine firm, and well, they probably got their own rules, and I but it is weird. I'm with you. I do think it's weird. We're past the hour. Whoop, consider different whip. Let's see. Yeah, okay. It's time to do our drawing. So let me do the drawing. I'll get the Wheel of Fortune up there, and then we'll do our drawing, and then I'll stick around and answer any remaining questions there are. So just Acolyte, that's where I'm stopping here. Yeah, his Test Geek material, I think, is a great paid supplement. Yeah, Test Geek is great. Brian is the master of distillation of your study materials to the test. And I just had a guy who I asked him, he's taking the Test Geek in the morning. I said, let's get confirmation. The guy who asked us, I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention. Oh my goodness, look at that super chat. Is there another super chat? Who's the 49? Wow, Ray, thank you so much. Man, thank you. That'll buy some bourbon. I guess I don't know, I'll have to figure out how it goes to the top. Maybe it's based on the number, right? If you put 50, you go to the top. All right, now this is a drawing that we do for a coaching call. And remember, you don't win a tutoring session at a date and time of your choice. What you win is a coaching call, and you would go to deantenneytutoring.setmore.com, and you'll see the tab where you claim you're winning. And you get a Zoom link, and you show up, and then we do it. We need a word. Don't put anything in the chat till I get this Wheel of Fortune up, because you have to put it in the chat exactly the way I'm going to put it in. Let's see. Let's use the word. Boy, you guys are going to hate me. Let's use the word matriculate with an exclamation board. Don't put it in yet. Don't put it in until I actually put the board up, right? So here we go. Share screen. Oh, there we go. Right. So boom. Let me get rid of that. And remember, if you win, what you win, remember, is the coaching call, and you claim your coaching call here. And if you would like to participate in the coaching call, put matriculate in that. So, I love that word. One of a famous football coach, I think it was New Rockney, or was it Vince Lombardi? One of them said, what we're going to do is matriculate down the field into scoring position. Right. And so that's what we do in terms of our test. We matriculate through our SIE, our 6 or a 7, our 63, 65, 66. And then when you matriculate all the way down, then you are in the industry, right? All right. Last call. We got 13 participants. Anybody else want to participate in the drawing? 17, last call. Oh, you guys should be worried. I see Marcel there. I assure you it's not fixed. Marcel and I cannot fix this thing. So, it's totally random. Okay, 19, last call. All right, here we go. And then remember, don't send me an email like a year from now saying you won this coaching call on August 12th, 2025. So Lander 484, go to deantenneytutoring.setmore.com, go to the class tab. It's not up yet because I don't put it up until the morning. So you're not going to find the class tab if you go there right now. But tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow morning, I'll do some admin, and I'll put that tab up. And that's open for any winner of our coaching calls. All right, let me get rid of the Wheel of Fortune. Boom. Let's go back to boom. Okay, let's see where I left off, and I'll answer any remaining questions before we call it night. Our official end time is 6 o'clock, so we're running a little over tonight. But as I told you, Brian's not around, so we can go as long as we want. There's Ray 49. There we go. And where was that other one? Lander 484. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I totally believe on that. I think Slice Wood, that's a new post there. Woo! Oh, kudos. Yeah, now a registered rep. That's right. Associated person. Watch out, world. Here comes lazy gun skill. Watch out, world. When another one of those might come out, well, there's like Gabriel, there's like 15 or 20 of those. So if you uploaded a 7 walkthrough, I don't call them walkthroughs, I call them explications. There's ones where you can watch me explicate, you can watch me with a student explicate. I'm not so sure why you're asking for one. I literally have dozens of them. There's probably 15 of them. Knopman, Kaplan, STC, so the answer is, so Gabriel, another, I guess, point. The answer is it will be when I get permission from somebody who buys a shared screen test. I charge about $1,000 to do that with people. And some of them are kind enough to then give me permission when they pass to put that up on the channel. I don't ever put anybody on the channel without their permission. But boy, Gabriel, I had somebody who was making fun of the test taker in the comments on my YouTube channel. And I said, hey, you need to check it, my friend. This is about your own testing journey, not his. He's passed his exam. He was kind enough to let you free ride on his experience. And then I had another person who said, well, Dean, I wish when you're doing these shared screen tests with people that, I'm listening in my car on the radio and this is how you should do it. And I said, well, listen, again, you're lucky. We're not making these for you. It's the test taker who makes it and pays for it. And then may or may not be kind enough to share. So I don't have a date when I'm going to put another one up, but there's 20 or 30 of them up there already. So there's a whole playlist, Gabriel. If you go to the playlist tab, you'll see practice test and practice questions for Series 7. I'll count them. I think my guess is there's at least 15 or 20 of them. Woohoo! Yeah, right on, right on. Okay, it looks like I got everybody caught up. I'm just checking here. There's Ray. There you go, Dan. Oh, thanks for joining us from LinkedIn. Oh, I just love profile pictures like that, man. Look at that. That guy looks spirit-filled. The problem with having such a great profile pic is if Dan ever has a bad day, we're gonna say, hey, Dan. Wow, 9, 10, 7, 4. Oh my goodness. The Great Recession. It's a good career. So Dan, welcome back. I think the reboot is going to be worth it. I think the reboot will be worth it for sure. Yep. 1 point. Yeah. Yes. There's laws on NASA exams. It's about a half and half laws, regs. And then the other half is investment vehicles, 65, 66, 63. It's just legal stuff. Right on. That hurts, Eric. That hurts. I will link to my video podcast episode. You failed. Is it over? Spoiler alert. It's not. The 9 on Friday. Make sure you focus, Folksville, on sales supervision. I think a lot of people who take the 9 think it's going to be advanced option strategies, and it's not. I mean, might there be an iron butterfly perhaps, but you could guess B, side of the universe, and move on. It's mainly about sales supervision. So stay focused on sales supervision. Was the first student, by the way. Okay, there you go. Those high almost passing to me are so exasperating because, that's usually some other variable. It's not that you weren't dedicated. It's not that you weren't disciplined. It's not that you weren't organized. You have enough knowledge base. It's usually something else, like maybe changing answers or something. I joke. It's kind of like you're saying you're going into the cave to slay the Series 7 dragon. You almost got him. Now he's waiting there, but you got a good look at him. So you should be able to go in there and slay him next time. There you go. There you go. There you go. Boom. Schwab. Hey, if you're a Schwabi, make sure, Davis, you read Schwab's memoir. He has a great memoir called Invested. I also recommend it to NE24. Ricketts, the founder of TD Ameritrade, his memoir, they now merged, is called The Harder I Work, the Luckier I Get. And I highly recommend that as well. So check out Schwab's memoir. Schwab used to be headquartered in San Francisco, Davis, and I spent a lot of my career in San Francisco. It'd be funny because people don't know that Chuck Schwab is a real guy. Chuck would be having lunch sometimes and people would come in and go, "Hey, you're that guy who plays Chuck Schwab on TV." Goes, "No, I am Chuck Schwab." Right. So not a problem, Brett. Not a problem. I failed my Series 7. My peers keep telling me just keep doing practice exams. Well, that's Monica. I disagree with your peers. As I said, what you're trying to do is do a practice exam and then use that to identify areas to remediate. I had a guy who did 5 practice exams. He's getting the same score all the time. I told him that's a complete waste of your time. You need to remediate and take a break to refresh, reset before you do the next one so you can get those scores up. Almost always, Monica, when somebody gets the scores that we're asking for and they still don't pass, it's because they memorize questions and answers and don't understand the concepts, right? So I totally disagree with your peers. You have a 2-year degree. So do I. I think AA is a great way to start. I didn't spend a whole bunch of money. I got my AA first and I got my bachelor's. I don't either, Lander. My AA is in political science. And then my bachelor's is, I majored in literature and minored in history and philosophy. People who come from a liberal arts background in our business do exceptionally well because we have a different brain housing group than other folks. So yeah, you should. Yeah, I would think you could, if you can read, I'm not being facetious, right? A good reader. I think it's funny because I have haters in social media who know that I'm not a finance guy, that I'm a liberal arts guy who's done very well in the securities industry. And I know all this stuff very well. And as much as they hate me when somebody else like yourself posts in their, or they said don't say anything. And I know that they want to say what they say to me, but they can't say it to new folks. Everyone, yeah, well, I tell you, it's been we have been really in a good role. Without, do you think it'd be better to find sponsorship? Well, it's up to you. Here's what I would say. You don't need sponsorship for 63, 65. I would take the 65 because the 65 works at a fee-based investment advisory firm. So you might be able to find a job with just a 65 at like Fisher Investments, for example. They have 65s there, right? So I would suggest the 65. Wouldn't hurt to have the 63, but that's the equivalent of a 66. So the 63 doesn't work without a 6 or 63. A 66 doesn't work without a 7. So my recommendation would be the 65. A lot of overlap on the SIE in terms of investments in economics. What's going to be different is the regulatory front. So I'd go for the 65 would be my recommendations. By the way, and then that's going to help you with the 7 because you're going to be, if I'm interviewing 2 people and they both want to get a 7, you're less of a speculative, bet on human gap. Like, oh, this person shows some initiative. They passed a test. That gives you a leg up. So I would tell you that could be a tiebreaker in that scenario. Well, let's see what else we got going. Yeah. Okay. So it looks like I think I got everybody. If I didn't, I apologize. Let me just check here one more time through. The other question that came up, and I'm just checking to make sure I got it. And I told you I answer these questions last because I think the people who showed up deserve their open. It looks like we got some more stuff here that came in. Do you have I have a whole playlist of practice exams for the 66. Every series exam has a playlist with just practice tests and practice questions. So the answer is yes. And it just tells you on that. If you go to the 60 tab list, I have 4 playlists for 66. I have a podcast that Brian and I did. I have lectures. I have an explication of the test specifications where I go through that and just tell you what's on the test. And then the 4th playlist is practice test and practice questions. Yeah, well, that comes from practice, drilling, and rehearsing, Nate. I would tell you that Past Perfect is bigger jerks, Nate, than FINRA. So, I'm not a fan of Past Perfect because I just think they're too obtuse. But if you can deal with Past Perfect, you can certainly deal with FINRA. Getting up, there you go. We want to be to have a margin of safety. We want you in the mid 70s. There you go. Yeah, there you go. Econ major. Yeah, there you go. SIE tomorrow. 88. Who is that? Michael Irvin. I think 88 is Marco Irvin. Connor. We'll send you good test buys. Connor, 100% pass rate. You want to know what has 100% pass rate? Here you go, Connor. What I want you to do after the live stream tonight is I want you to go in your bathroom. I want you to look in the mirror. And I want you to say, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the greatest SIE test taker of them all? Connor, Connor, Connor. Hurrah! Now, that's half of what I want you to do. When you wake up in the morning, Connor, I want you to go back to the mirror. Again, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the greatest SIE test taker of them all? Connor, Connor, Connor. Hurrah! Connor, 100% pass rate. I had a guy, he said, Dean, he said, I did that. And then he said, about 30, 40 questions in, I was kind of drooping a little bit. And so he said, I went into the bathroom. I took a bathroom break and I went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror and I said, mirror, mirror on the wall. And he did it. He goes, everybody in the exam site started cracking up. They thought I was nuts. But I thought it was a little good comic relief. So Connor, if you have the guts and the inclination, maybe during the break, you go into the bathroom. We're all sitting in good test vibes. Come back next Tuesday. I'll tell you what, Connor, I have so much faith in you. Oh, I got to stop drinking this wild turkey, right? I'm going to ring the bell in advance. That too has 100 pass rate. I've never read the bill for somebody in advance and they didn't make it. Schwab Institutional Phoenix, there you go. Oh, man, you go way back, way back. Oh, I do remember A.G. Edwards. It was a great firm. I was talking to a guy who's a partner at Edward D. Jones. I said, why they drop the D? Because the Missouri, A.G. Edwards is Missouri, and so is Edward Jones. Yeah, I love the site there in Phoenix and Scottsdale. I used to teach. I taught so much at Schwab campuses, Dan, that I had a Schwab ID badge. I had both a Schwab and a Vanguard ID badge that would let me onto those campuses because I would be there enough that I didn't want to have a security guard like escort me. And so I used to stay right there next to the mall. I loved it because I could catch the bus right there and take me up, drop me off at Schwab, and I could teach, ride the bus back. I went to Arizona State, so I got to kind of see how much the place has grown. But it was funny that I had just done teaching at Phoenix campus, and I was walking back to the hotel, and this guy who was in class pulled over, and he offered me a ride. And he said, well, Dean, what is your hesitation? I said, I don't want to take a ride from somebody who's not going to pass their test. So, that could be bad energy if I bond with you and then you don't make your mark. I said, so I'm only accepting the ride if you assure me that you're going to pass your Series 7. Otherwise, I don't want to ride. Schwab is another great firm. I mean, there's the firms where I feel good that people can build their careers there. So JP Morgan's another one. I love that. There's certain firms that I love and they tell me they love me too, so mutual love fest at some place. I'm in oil and gas. Oh, Hamilton. So you're a syndicator, perhaps? I do not have a Series 22 playlist, unfortunately. There's just not enough people taking it. Hamilton, my email is dean@guruexamprep.com. You're welcome to send me any questions. I do have a lecture on partnerships, but I think it would be too shallow, perhaps, for the 22. I don't know where you're based, Hamilton, but I think this is funny. When I was a baby broker, I did oil and gas syndications, and I was in Hobbs, New Mexico. And I had said to the people in the next morning, I said, man, if I were a broker in this town, Hamilton, I'd be cold calling the Permian family because they own everything. Permian Ford, Permian Park, Permian this. The whole class started roaring with laughter. They said, son, you're in the Permian Basin. That is not a family. It's a geological age. I could see myself embarrassed. Can I talk to Mr. Permian? How about Mrs. Permian? Is she available? Great fun, Hamilton. I showed a lot of Red Eagle. I sold a lot of New York Life used to, surprisingly enough, have great oil and gas programs. So I don't know if you're a wholesaler or you're just selling them individually, but I had a great wholesaler from Red Eagle. His name was Dave Coulter, and that guy was a genius. But it was great because I just invite him and invite the people, and he'd do the seminar, and we'd sign people up. Hello, McKenzie. I have less than 2 weeks. My studying is kind of all over the place. That's not good. What should your main focus be? Well, I need to know what exam you're taking. to tell you what your main focus should be. And I'd like to see a practice test score. So I'd like to know what exam, put it in the chat. I think I'm coming to the end of the chat. Put that in the chat and then put me if you've done a practice test, because what you should do if you haven't is do a practice test and find where you need to spend some more time to remediate, as we said. There you go, Series 7. So you want to focus on munis, options, and mutual funds. And you want to do a practice test right away. Jack, at Friday, get a good night's rest Thursday. You basically have 2 more days to, 1 more day to work your ass off, which is tomorrow. And then Thursday, you got to kind of wind down, because what you need to do is kind of the biggest thing is to get some rest and just keep your rhythm and stick the landing. So you're not going to learn any new things. Don't go any rabbit holes here. Avoid energy vampires between now and then. Well, there you go. So, again, I have a podcast episode. There you go. Love it. Love it. Good luck, Connor. We're all with you. Little or none, Jack. There's only 3 or 4 questions. They're pretty straightforward. My lecture on margin is called Don't Overdose. You should know the documentation for sure. You should know maintenance for sure. You should know the classical margin equation, long and short. It's not an important topic at all. We have margin clerks who do that for us. All test prep vendors. We had a great question last time, Jack. The question was, what are 3 rabbit holes to avoid on Series 7? Right? And I said partnerships, margin, balance sheets. And then I thought about that after we ended, Jack, and I would amend my answer. And I think I would say margin, partnerships, and insurance. Not variable annuities, insurance, like whole life and variable life things. Best email for me is dean@guruexamprep.com. Let me just put that up there for you. I think I have that one on my banners here somewhere. Oh, this will work too. Boom. So there's my email address. Okay, let's see. Yeah, the problem, Hamilton, is almost, I don't know of any test prep vendors. Solomon merged with, got acquired by Past Perfect, and Jeremy Solomon offered 22. I don't even know what test prep vendors still offer 22. My guess would be maybe Past Perfect, maybe, I don't think Kaplan offers it anymore. I don't think Training Consultants. I like it. Feli, am I pronouncing that right? Well, were you here? I gave you the number 1 thing to do. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the greatest SIE taste taker of them all? Feli, Feli, Feli. Hoorah! Listen, when you're testing, we've had people saying testing tomorrow, testing Friday. The most important thing is you got to be confident in the execution of your study plan, right? Because it's over. The study plan is over. The execution. You've got to be confident in yourself. Most importantly, Connor, Feli, tomorrow, you've got to be confident in your answers. Do not change your answers. That's what I would tell you. That's the biggest advice I can give to anybody who's testing the next day. By the way, if you're a young man, Connor, or young woman, or young man, Feli, I think a lot of our young men and women who were in college got away with cramming the night before, and that is no longer going to work. You're doing yourself a disservice to try and cram the night before, because you're just going to be tired. And then your reading skills are going to be greatly diminished, and you're putting yourself at risk. So, you need to make sure you get a good night's rest, because you want to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you want your reading skills in top form. That's the most important thing for tomorrow. Wow, look at all those testing victories 3 years ago. Woo! Well, yeah, that's an important. I call it the cast of characters, Adam. So, the analogy I use, Adam, is that I like when I go to a play and they give me a playlist, the playbill. The playbill tells me the actors, the characters, may give me an overview of the play. And if I get lost, I kind of go, now, who's that guy again? Oh, that's Iago. No, Adam, I love that when I'm watching Prime and an actor looks familiar, I can hit the button and it'll tell me who it is. And Adam, I'm so frustrated with Netflix, because when I do that on Netflix, it doesn't come up. I go, well, gee, if Amazon Prime can do that, why can't you do that? Right? So it's really important to know when you're reading a NASA question, which cast member are they asking you about? Are they asking about a broker dealer or an agent of a broker-dealer because that's a little more straightforward. Now, broker-dealers are pretty easy on the registration front. No office, no retail, no register, right? And agents are pretty straightforward. If they're asking about investment advisor, it gets a little more complicated, right? Because then you got to read further to find out whether they're federally covered or not. If they're federally covered, pretty straightforward. The investment advisor, if they're federally covered, are never registering with any state, period, full stop. I have a guy testing tomorrow in his tutoring session. When you get a bad miss, I say, man, bad miss. Angels weep for you, my friend. That was really bad. Because he took an answer that said this investment advisor is going to register with both the SEC and the state. That's impossible. So that's a really bad answer. It's one or the other. Now, what follows from that is really important, right? The guy's tutoring today, he works for a federally covered investment advisor. His life is pretty simple. He only has to register in a state when he has a place of business. So all the thing in the answer about state A and state B and state D and state X, all he has to look for is where's the office. And if he has an office, he registers. End of story. Now, if it's a state investment advisor, well, then it gets a little more complicated because then we have this idea of de minimis and some other things. But what you really got to do is RTFQ, read the full question, make sure you understand what you're being asked and who is the player that you're being asked about, right? Who is the player? And then understand those questions, those answers that are being offered to you, right? So just, you got to read the question for context. Well, exemptions on registration. Well, remember this, it fits in with what we just talked about. Well, this is Adam is still you, so that's good. Right? Because that goes together. So I don't have to register the broker dealer if I just told you that. I'm exempt if I don't have an office, I don't have a retail client, I know register, right? Advertising is different for BDs. BDs, the advertising is, straightforward. There's a difference between state advisors and federally covered about testimonials. On the federal level, investment advisors can use testimonials with disclosures. State administrators frown upon testimonials. There you go. That have come up in debrief. No, Dominique, pretty much the same stuff. Pretty much the same stuff. So I don't have any unique things to tell you. I'm glad to hear that. Looks like we're at the end. And I told you one last thing here. I always try and answer the questions last that people had. And the last question that got sent in was somebody had asked about suitability. And, whenever there's a 3 of a thing on a test, I would stand by for the accept format. So, what I would be expecting as a test taker is under FINRA Rule 2111, all the following are suitability obligations except. And D will be something that isn't, because there's actually 3 main suitability. The first one is reasonable basis suitability. What I think about here is I think about product. When I was a baby broker, I made a gazillion cold calls using the Franklin tax-free fund. And so I have a reasonable basis to believe that when I'm making this call, I'm going to find somebody in a high income tax bracket for whom this would be appropriate. Right. So I think of this first one, reasonable basis, is that I think there's somebody that this might make sense to. Customer specific. Here I think of a guy I had, and he wanted to make this investment. I said, listen, I got to do some more data gathering because based on what I have so far, your profile, I know the compliance department is going to be all over me. The compliance department sometimes is called the sales prevention department. And in most situations, a man of your age, this would be inappropriate. You have articulated to me that I think it is appropriate and it's your money. And so I'm going to go to bat for you. And then when compliance calls me, I'll say, well, listen, give the guy a call. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. He's in a very unique situation. I would agree that, without this other, did you check what I sent you? I went way beyond what I usually do to qualify this customer and verify that. I had a guy who wanted to short this stock and compliance wouldn't let him do it because it had a dividend. And he actually thought they were going to omit or cut the dividend. He was right. And then, he was mad because we would let him short the stock, right? So I think of this now as a specific customer that under other circumstance, perhaps this would not be appropriate, but in this unique situation of this customer, it is a suitable recommendation. And then the last one is quantitative suitability. And so when I think quantitative, I think number, quantity. And what this one is about is if I'm making a series of recommendations, now each of these recommendations in of itself will look appropriate. However, when we string them together, we go, is Dean generating commissions? Is this just really churning? I mean, for example, how many growth funds does a guy need? I mean, so maybe the growth fund is suitable. Does he really need a Fidelity, and he needs an American fund, and it looks like me that the series of recommendations are avoiding a breakpoint, for example, right? So that's quantitative, right? Or, maybe I'm making a series of recommendations about covered calls. Do you really need 15 of them in a month? Probably not. Right. So those are the three standards of suitability under FINRA Rule 2111. And that was that last one, right? I think of this one excessive. I think kind of like churning. So I hope you found that helpful. And I think as that call it a night, let's see. Trey, kudos, Trey. Trey passed. Context, I think, is always important, Adam, for sure. On Friday, any question there? Okay. All right. So remember, inch by inch, your exam is a cinch. Yard by yard, your exam is hard. Okay, here's what we're going to do in the chat. Everybody in the chat is going to put mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the greatest test taker of them all? And you're going to say, me, right? All right, let's see if anybody's going to partake. Meanwhile, I'll finish up my wild turkey. No takers? No takers. Oh, that's pretty depressing. 100% pass rate. All right, Trey, you passed. Okay, I guess I was a little too much for you on that one, huh? How about I'm going to pass the first time. Anybody? Oh, there we go. We got a player. Alyssa's going to pass. We got a player. There we go. Zaneta. All right. If that's too much, I get it. I may be too much. Sometimes I'm a little too much. Maybe you can just put in the chat, I'm going to pass the first time. Those of you who are retesting, one of my favorite test takers, an alumnus, is Vince. I didn't see Vince here tonight, but, I was so excited for him because he really had a rocky kind of test journey. And, he finally got it all done. And I was so excited. I get so excited, I had to tell people, well, no, we don't want to do like Vince. We don't want to have a rocky journey, right? Let's try and pass the first time. That would be ideal. But if we don't pass the first time, how we respond to that is really important. I think it says a lot to your firm about how you respond to that misfortune. I told you, I've had some brokers. I had one broker, he used it in his presentation. He would go and tell clients and say, hey, if anybody knows this stuff, it's me. I had to take this damn test 5 times. People invest with you because they like you and they trust you. They don't really care that you can pass an exam. And I'm not being facetious. In my business, when I hired somebody, if they got over 90 in those days, they gave scores. I would say, I think I should fire you now. And they go, why? I said, because if you got over 90, all you've proven is you're big a jerk as the person who wrote the test. And I'm going to be spending a lot of time with you. And I don't know if I want to spend time with somebody like that. In the office, we spend sometimes more time in the office with these folks than our families, right? And the second reason is, how am I going to supervise you if you're smarter than me? You're always going to be one step ahead of me. So I think I should just fire you now. So, all right, everybody. I'll see you next Tuesday, 5:00. If you're interested in joining us for the jam session, give me some time tomorrow morning. But if you go to deantenneytutoring.setmore.com, you'll find the weekly jam session link. If you want to join us, we did one this morning. It's very much like this, except it's a smaller group, and I have a whiteboard, and we can do shared screen, and we can bring up practice questions and kind of tear them apart. So that's what that's about, and that's available to anybody. You don't have to be paying me for tutoring or anything. So check that out. Our winner tonight, you can claim won't be there till tomorrow, but that's the coaching call. You'll find that in the class tab. It says coaching call for weekly winners. You just hit that, register. It'll send you a link. And then I show up and I say, what's on your Dean to-do list for your coaching call? And we talk about whatever you want to talk about. All right. The best places to work in investment recommendations are finding, well, that's the big, once you pass, you got to go find, as brokers, we get paid. I think people don't realize that we don't get paid until we get the last step. We got to find money. We don't get paid for finding the money. We got to move the money. We don't get paid for that either. Then we got to place the money. And I think sometimes people underestimate that sales cycle and how long that may take, particularly if you don't start out, knowing a lot of rich people. I don't. I mean, I started out with, so I had to go find that. So everybody does it a little differently. And I think my recommendation there would be kind of outdated because I'm an 80s, cold calling cowboy kind of a guy from the 80s. And I just don't think that would work anymore. I started out as a retail broker, and then I transitioned to an institutional broker. So at the end of my career, I was more of an investment banker guy, institutional guy. In the beginning of my career, I was a retail stockbroker for first 10 years or so of my career. And back then I told you I was a product pusher. Nothing wrong with that. I'm pushing good products, tax-free funds, muni bonds, that kind of stuff. Oil and gas partnerships. So, all right, everybody. I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.